In the previous video, we saw how to create defined data structures. One of the limitations of defined data structures, though, is that they can't perform any actions in and of themselves. They always need something else, some other component to generate them or to perform a method on them. To have an object with methods such as a duck that we could then make fly with a method, we'll use folder entities. Folder entities are so called because they contain information about the folder they belong to, primarily the folder ID. So when you create a folder entity, it has a reference back to the parent folder, whereas a regular data structure doesn't. Also, folder entities have the ability to perform actions. Let's go to data structures and add a folder entity. Just like our previous data structure, we'll call it duck, and we will give it a color. I'll give it a sex. I'll give it a number of wings. And we will give it a can fly. Okay. So there are the essential properties of our duck. To allow us to add, delete, or edit a duck entity that's inside of a folder, we'll select these checkboxes here. We will also generate a create step, edit, delete, and get steps. These steps right here are useful inside of the flow designer. So when we have a flow, and let's say we are iterating through a CSV file that contains data on a lot of ducks. When we want to create those ducks, we'll use the CSV components to iterate through all the rows of that CSV, and then based on that CSV, create a duck. If we want to use a similar process to edit or delete ducks, we would use those steps. If we don't select these steps won't appear in the flow designer. So we are going to keep these selected. We are going to generate the flow folder add step, so that's useful when we are running a process and we want to add an entity to that process folder. And we'll also generate the entity service. That generate entity service checkbox will give us a folder down here under entity actions where we can create additional actions that only apply to ducks. So we will click OK and restart the service. Now we restart the service because the services that are created for the duck and created for our duck and the most basic services that are created for our duck, the add, create, edit, and delete, need to patch into the core services that Decisions provides. So that's why we have to restart the service there. So we'll give it a second to restart. When our service has restarted again, under Entity Actions, we'll see a new folder for the duck type that we created. And now we have the option here to create a flow, and inside this flow we would see something like, actually, make duck fly. Now we're not actually going to make the duck fly, but inside this flow, if we had steps or if we had procedures to essentially accomplish the duck flight action, we would place those steps in here. We'd save the flow, and if we were to, let's say, navigate to a folder, we would have the option to add a duck. We'd say it can fly and give it 2 wings. And we would call this mallard duck. Mallard ducks have a number of pretty colors, but they're predominantly brown. And we'll say it's a female duck, and we'll say this female mallard duck is brown. Now we have this duck created in our folder here. Now this is just a regular folder. It could be a designer project folder or a process folder. It is actually a designer project folder, but it could be any type of folder, including a folder extension, which we'll explore in just one second. In addition to the delete entity, edit to object, and manage options in the action menu, we also have the action make duck fly. That doesn't actually do anything, but the action is there. So if you need to represent objects that can perform actions or that have particular actions associated just with them, you'll probably want to use folder entities. In the next video, we'll take a look at folder extensions. Folder extensions work much like folder entities, except they're actually folders, so you can use them to contain other entities, such as the folder entities.